Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today I have a very awesome guest with me, Dr. Bill Donohue. Bill Donohue is the president and CEO of the Catholic League. He also has a PhD in sociology, and he was also a college professor at La Roche College in Pittsburgh. He is also former U.S. Air Force. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you so much for having me on, Connor. I really appreciate it.
So we're talking today about your book, War on Virtue: How the Ruling Class is Killing the American Dream. It really does seem that that is at the forefront of all of American politics at the moment. Would you mind explaining to us what virtue is? Just give us the basics on what virtue is.
Well, virtue, the first to talk about it basically were the Greeks and the Romans, Aristotle and Cicero, and then, of course, then the Catholic Church pioneered it. For me, it's just two words: good habit. Virtue is a good habit. And we need more good habits in our society. And when I talk about the vital virtues of personal responsibility, self discipline, and perseverance, I mentioned those three because after making a study of successful individuals and demographic groups, I looked at all the other virtues and I wrote a book, Why Catholicism Matters, about the cardinal virtues. They're very important, particularly prudence. But when it comes to the American dream, which for the most part, it does have a spiritual element to it, but for the most part, it's materialistic. If you're going to do well in school, if you're going to do well in the workplace, you have to be able to practice self-discipline, or what some others would call self-control, or today, impulse control. You have to be able to persevere when you run into adversity. The psychologists call it grit. You have to accept personal responsibility for your behavior. And this would include sometimes we're not dealt a fair deck of cards. And I understand that, particularly some demographic groups. But unless you accept personal responsibility for your own actions, you're not likely to succeed either. Now, if you have these values inculcated into you, it doesn't guarantee success, but I can guarantee you one thing: if you don't have them, you can't be a success in any walk of life, whether you're an athlete or whether you are a pilot. It doesn't make any difference. You have to be able to practice the vital virtues.
Yeah, you were on Raymond Arroyo's World Over recently, and one of the things that he mentioned was that you grew up without a father, and I imagine that was pretty difficult to gain those virtues.
Well, it was, and the thing is this: my mother worked as a nurse, and she worked day and at night, so I didn't see her most of the time, except for the weekends. My grandparents from Ireland basically raised me and my sister. She passed away, and girls need fathers as well, but boys in particular, because boys tend to be more impulsive. They're more destructive in their behavior. We have higher levels of testosterone. We're more aggressive, and unless there's somebody like a father to kind of sit on the kid and say, listen, you can't get away with this, boys will likely to be mischievous, if not worse. I wasn't a mean kid, but I was mischievous. I was constantly in trouble in elementary school, constantly in trouble, got suspended from high school, got thrown out of college. And then I went into the Air Force during the Vietnam War period. I wasn't in Vietnam. I was out in Northern California. I was an accountant. I was trained, and I kind of grew up very quickly during the Civil Rights Movement, which I jumped into because I'd always been a jazz aficionado. Even though I was a lousy student, I didn't even care about school. I never did most of my homework. Once I did get serious, I did extremely well. But I learned from the way blacks were treated in this country. I got a tutorial by just studying jazz musicians and what they had to go through in this country. So when the Civil Rights Movement came around in the late 1960s, I kind of really dived into it. But yes, boys need fathers to tame them. And when they don't, they tend to run wild. And the reason I mentioned that in the book, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to say something, too many white people in particular, but not exclusively, seem to think that the crime rate, which is much higher in terms of violent crime amongst African Americans, is an expression of race. It has nothing to do with race. If you're a black kid who has a father and a mother, you're not likely to be out there being in trouble in school and with the law. It's the kids who come from the one-parent families. Unfortunately, 70% of all black kids today are born out of wedlock. And in some neighborhoods, it's 80 and 90%, which is even worse. Now, one of the points of the book is, how did we get to this point? It's not due to slavery and racial discrimination. As recently as the 1950s, well after slavery, and still when racial discrimination is much worse than it is today, the black family was relatively intact. It began to fall apart in the 1960s when the ruling class, mostly white, the elites, the well-educated ones, began to say, listen, you can't make it on your own. We're going to create a welfare state for you. And that gave an invitation for the father to leave the home so that the wife and the kids could get more money. I mean, we destroyed the family, the black family, largely because of misguided social welfare programs. By the way, not all of them were misguided. There are some people whom I identify in the book who knew exactly what they were doing, and they may not have wanted to crush the black family. They did want to have the cities go bankrupt, so that the federal government could step in and create socialism. So yeah, there's the white ruling class, which claims to be non-racist and on the side of blacks. I am arguing in the book that they are the biggest racists in America today.
Yeah. So who are the ruling class in America today? Could you go into that?
Sure. Well, they would be the people at the top, the decision makers in education, in the military, in the healthcare industry, in the arts, in the entertainment industry, in the media, certainly in education. They're the decision makers, and they have become almost uniformly adopting the left-wing politics, woke politics. It used to be that the healthcare industry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Fortune 500 stayed out of the area politics. But now Anheuser-Busch, instead of just selling beer, it has to try and market the wonders of transgenderism. The Navy has a transgender guy dressed like a girl to recruit young men. This would never have happened even 10 years ago, never mind 50 years ago. The idea that traditional institutions such as the military, the healthcare industry, the corporations, that they have actually taken the side of those people who are working against the best interests of our country and who are working at making it difficult for the vital virtues of personal responsibility, self-discipline, and perseverance to exist. Yeah, this is something which is new and it's pernicious, and the average American has to learn to disregard much of what they're getting from the so-called experts. We were lied to about COVID, and now we're being lied to again when we're told that to do well in school is an expression of whiteness. If you believe that, then you are the enemy of black people. So, because the only answer then is you don't want to have correct spelling and correct math, because then that'll be like Whitey. Oh, okay, so that's bad. So we know what the alternative is. Then you can be illiterate.
Yeah. How did these elites, especially in in these industries that you're discussing that used to not be political, at least from the outside, how did these ideas get into these institutions?
Well, I give a lot of credit to organizations such as the Human Rights Campaign. I don't agree with them. I think they're anti-Catholic, but I have to be fair. They're very astute. This is the biggest, most influential gay group in the country. It's well funded by the corporations, and they go around to Wall Street the way Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton used to do. Sharpton and Jackson used to hustle Wall Street, and if we don't do what we want in terms of affirmative action, etc., you're going to pay the price. Wall Street has lots of money. They're quick to write a check if they can get the left off their back. But when they have actually now are advocating that the Equality Act get passed, which would shut down Catholic institutions, hospitals and doctors, forcing them to perform abortions and sex reassignment surgeries, then you realize that the corporations have now become the enemy. Now, how many of these corporations, are they aware, for example, the Goldman Sachs and these people, are they aware that the Equality Act, if it were to pass, and Biden said he would sign it, that the Freedom Restoration Act, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, which was signed by President Bill Clinton, they would exempt themselves from that legislation. This is unprecedented. In other words, there's been no religious liberty protection for Catholics or anybody else if the Equality Act were to pass. Now, do the people at Goldman Sachs and at Cigna and all the big institutions, Vanguard and BlackRock, do they know this? I don't really know that, Connor. I wish I did know the answer, but I know that Human Rights Campaign knows it. And they're just banking on the elites to just basically we just get us off our back. Now, I'm not saying that the average military man or woman is a bad person. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I am saying that this idea about critical race theory and the whole idea of transgender mania, it has definitely infected the mindset of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the elites in all the major organizations in our society.
Are the people in these institutions at a lower level that aren't in the sort of elite class or the ruling class, how are they able to resist this, or like what would be your advice for them in
Well,
resisting this?
Well, it's easy for me as an activist. And I mean, I get paid to be an activist. So I don't want to be too hard on the men and women who, this is an excellent question, by the way, Connor. It really is, because the average guy and gal who are working for a corporation where they see these policies and they don't agree with them. Let's say you work for Anheuser-Busch and you saw the Bud Light commercial and whatnot. You don't want to risk your job either. I mean, these people have kids, they have mortgages, they've got college tuition to consider, and I'm not expecting everybody to be a martyr and just dive on your sword. I am saying this though: if enough of them could gently nudge and meet with and talk to some of the people at the top and say, "Listen, I think it's a bit misguided. Can you reconsider?" I think there are certain things like that can be done. I'm much more optimistic about changing the corporate world than I am, for example, even the military. That might surprise people, because the military is all paid for by the public. One says they don't care. But take a look at Budweiser now. Anheuser-Busch has lost, according to the Daily Mail, $6 billion. $6 billion in the last few weeks because of people boycotting, because they insulted their intelligence by bringing in this Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender guy, to hawk their product. So I do think that when the pushback takes place, we went after Disney. I made a documentary which won all kinds of awards, came out in January. It's available on Amazon, and millions upon millions of Americans have seen it. I don't know how much effect it had on Disney's last quarter, but their last quarter was horrible. Had their last quarter been good, I would have to conclude that the Catholic League failed when we wanted to try and change Disney, because they did well. No, they're doing very poorly. I'm not predicting Disney's going to fold next week, by the way. I'm just simply saying they're going through a rough patch. And we at the Catholic League, I think, had something to do with it. It comes down to follow the money. I mean, often the case that is. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's oversimplified. But if the people at the top find out that they're paying a price, if they're getting pinched, to get back to your question, maybe those maybe in the second and third tier might be more emboldened to speak to them and say, listen, I'm not asking you to take the side of, let's say, the Catholic League. In fact, I expressly said in my letter to the CEO of Anheuser-Busch this week, I don't want you to take the side of the Catholic League, but I don't want you to take the side of the Human Rights Campaign either. Let us duke it out in the area of activism in our society. You should just do what you do. You sell beer, sell beer. You sell sneakers, sell sneakers. You sell cheese, sell cheese. Don't get involved in the political things of today, which are divisive, and they're tearing this country apart. And I do think that the corporations will begin to move away from their kind of woke politics. I'm more confident that they'll do it than government. The only way you get the government to stop is when the voters go to the polls and say, listen, I'm not going to vote for these people anymore.
Yeah. Isn't one of the dangers though of leaving companies sort of as they are, or out of the fray, is that they still are donating to political campaigns?
Well, then you're gonna have a lot of work there, because, quite frankly, this has been a challenge in the Supreme Court a long time ago. The Supreme Court understands that corporations are persons in that sense. In other words, if you tell people, people make the argument, it was sustained by the courts, that my freedom of speech is involved. If, let's say, I'm a multimillionaire, a billionaire for that matter, and I want to print gazillion copies of these flyers and these magazines and posters, and take out ads on TV and radio and the internet saying I'm for X and I'm against Y, running for office, and you tell me I can't do that, you're really infringing on my freedom of speech. It's my money. I should be able to spend my money any way I want. And if I want to spend my money going against Mr. X and defending Mr. Y, who is the government to tell me I can't do that? That's why that's won in the Supreme Court. They look at it as a free speech issue, which ultimately it really is. Because then you have the government say, well, you have to spend, you can buy yachts, but you can't take out an ad in a newspaper. And I don't think that's going to happen. So we have to be as successful as the Human Rights Campaign in meeting with some of the corporate heads and say, listen, this is bad politics. It's bad business. Why don't you just be agnostic? Just be neutral. Just get back to selling whatever you sell in terms of goods or services. And, the other side may not like it initially. Believe me, I think the corporate world would actually take a deep sigh of relief because right now they're getting hammered. I don't think they need this. I think they want to get back to basics. Just sell your product.
Is there a future where you might think that they should take a side, but your side eventually, not necessarily in the next 10 years or something, but in the next 20?
I'd rather them stay out of it because one thing I've learned, I'm a lot older than you are, Connor, the left gets into everything. The left elite always finds a way in. So if they did take our side, that might make me happy in the short run, but I know that would just simply aid and abet the left. The George Soroses would come out of the woodwork and to defeat us. And quite frankly, there's more of them than there are us. So I think the best we can do for the moment is to get the elites to simply say, let's be agnostic, let's be neutral, let's get out of this and just sell our services and our goods and leave the fighting to the rest of us. I'd be very happy with that because I think we can win on that score.
Gotcha. How influential is someone like George Soros?
Oh, the effect that he's had in this country is pernicious. Just take one thing. If you take a look at all the major cities, I talk about it in The War on Virtue. Chapter 7 is on incivility and about crime. If you take a look at all the major cities that are suffering a condition where crime is almost legal, where you can do whatever you want and you're let out immediately, those DAs are bought and paid for by George Soros. That's true in New York, LA, Philadelphia, all over the country, San Francisco. And so he's had tremendous effect in that. He hates America. He wants to sabotage America. There's no other way you can look at this. And the ultimate people who pay the price, again, are blacks. Blacks do not want to defund the police. It's the white elite who want to do that. Blacks do not want to abolish the prisons. It's the white elite who want to do that. Blacks do not want us to say that hard work and self-reliance are bad things. That's what they do at the Smithsonian Institute of African American History and Culture. They teach that self-reliance and correct spelling and mathematics is an example of whiteness. What? So you don't want to be like Whitey. I guess you should be illiterate. Now we'll raise the flag. That's a great triumph. No, the average black person has common sense. It's the elite white people. And again, it's not the sons and daughters of the cops and the firemen, the working class, that are the problem. But blacks are beginning to push back. Asians are tired of being discriminated against because they do too well. Muslims are leading the fight to get rid of the pornographic books that are being sent to the kids in the little schools in form of sex education dealing with gay issues. You've got Mormons who have become disenchanted. You've got a situation with Hispanics. They don't like a lot of what's going on in this country, and they're the ones who congratulate them. They push back on this idea that they are Latinx. Mm-hmm. No, they said we are Latino, male, or Latina, female. We're not Latinx. You don't try to neuter us and say we don't understand the difference between men and women. They push back so hard, they couldn't get any higher than 3% of Hispanics going along with Latinx in the polls, that the left basically has moved away. So what I'm saying, Connor, is that there are some important things that are happening which are encouraging. And just, again, not to toot our own horn, but the effect that we've had in moving the needle, I think, with Disney because of our documentary is important. And I'm hopeful that The War on Virtue, my latest book, published by Sophia Institute Press, also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, that people will read it and digest it. I went through a lot of work. I've been studying this stuff for many, many, many years. It's loaded with footnotes. This is not an opinion-based, uninformed book. I'm always careful with attribution. I give the evidence because I don't want somebody to say, well, that's just Donahue's opinion, so why do I care? No. And the sources I get are generally very much down the middle in the scientific area, if not on the left. So they can't say that this is some kind of a right-wing harangue. That argument won't stick.
Yeah, your book is definitely thoroughly sourced, which is very great. And I do think it's important that people know how important the work of the Catholic League is. I'll have a link in the description to your website, the Catholic League website, because if people don't understand that they can push back and achieve successes in this area, then they might, just throw their hands up in the air and admit defeat when that's the complete opposite of what we want to achieve.
That's right. You always have to give people reason for optimism. I'm generally not a pessimist. I mean, I don't live in a polyandrous world where everything is happy and good. I know there are serious problems in this country, and everybody knows what they are. The culture itself is in serious trouble. But I'm also a believer that there's no such thing as an iron law of history. And by that, I mean that there's no guarantee that things have to stay this way. History goes forward, it goes backwards, it goes sideways, it's jagged. It depends on the people who are in the command positions. Sadly, the elites today, that's where we got to this point, but they are answerable too. There's too many of us commonsensical people in the rank and file who can push back, and there's evidence that that is beginning to happen. So the Navy has gotten a tremendous blowback from its ad pushing transgenderism on recruits. Their recruitment goals are way down. The same is true of the Air Force and the Army, which have gotten into this woke politics. The Marines are not going south because they've pretty much held steady and they're not involved in politics. So if anybody has any brains on this, they'll realize that the answer is you either stay out of politics when you don't belong there, or you have to understand that if we don't have a measure of civility and community in this country, if you don't have virtue inculcated into the young people in particular, you're going to have a society which is threatening to be morally anarchic. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Yeah. You discussed the sort of this Air Force ad and that sort of thing. And are there any, like, what kind of rules are there that are sort of imposing this type of stuff onto the military?
Well, again, you're the idea that you can, excuse me, the idea that you would encourage men who have a problem to go out there and recruit other men, and that this was officially approved by the Navy at the top. This wasn't some guy on a weekend, just on a lark. Indicates that there is a serious shift going on in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, beginning with Milley. And but I am hopeful because of the blowback that people are realizing we've got to change this. It isn't exclusively on sex; it's also on race. When you do as they're doing at West Point, all right, they are teaching kids what pronouns they have to use. They're also teaching critical race theory, which basically means I have a long section about critical race theory in the book, War and Virtue. Basically means that all white people are inveterate racist. Now that position, I would argue, is inherently racist. When you condemn all people because of the pigmentation of their skin, knowing none of them except a few of them, obviously, and you say they're all equally guilty, what, for the crimes of the past? And you're going to condemn people on this? The military is adopted this. The Air Force Academy, I wrote to the head of the Air Force Academy last year about this. They're teaching the whites and the blacks that whitey is a racist. Now, if this is creating division in our society, and racism is being promoted this spring on the Ivy League campuses when they have separate graduation ceremonies for white and black graduates.
Yeah.
Separate graduation ceremonies for trans and gays and everybody else and Asians and Hispanics. That is done intentionally. It's not a mistake. They want to divide the country. This is the new apartheid. That's what this is. It's the new apartheid. They want to divide because the old adage about united we stand, divided we fall, they know that. And that's why they want us to fall, which is precisely why they foment all of these divisions.
Where's the Supreme Court regarding these issues, especially in the military? Like,
Uh,
do they not have any sort of motive or authority in this area?
well, they would because it's a public institution. They've been somewhat reluctant to get involved in these things, as everybody knows. When you get the Supreme Court involved in very sensitive cultural issues, abortion being one, that mistake was made in '73. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a proponent of abortion, but she also said, as did the editorial board of the New Republic back in 1973, they're both supporting abortion, that the Supreme Court was wrong. They should never have made that decision. They were glad that abortion was legal, but their question here was whether was it principled? By what authority did 9 unelected judges have to invent a right to abortion? If it's not mentioned, then it's up to the states. And so the Supreme Court made a terrible decision. They made up a right to abortion out of whole cloth. It's nowhere mentioned or even vaguely mentioned in the United States Constitution. And that tore the country apart. And I give the justices credit for the most part, as well as a lot in the liberal community. They've learned that, you know what, this is divisive. We can't go down this road. We got to be careful how far we go. On the other hand, I'm sick and tired of hearing the left tell us that we need to respect precedent. That's what they said about Roe v. Wade. They didn't respect precedent when it came to Bowers versus Hardwick, which said that 2 gay men could not get married. They wanted to get that overthrown, and they did it overfell. In other words, the left is not principled. It's all about politics. And that decision of gay marriage should never have been rendered. It shouldn't have been a decision of the courts any more than Roe v. Wade should have been. These are examples of judicial imperialism. Now, we've won with abortion, namely that it's back in the hands of the state. I don't know. I'm less auspicious about what will happen dealing with gay marriage.
Mm. But what about like stopping the military from basically brainwashing their cadets and their military officers? Like
I don't
how
think Yeah, I doubt very much that the Supreme Court, they don't want to get into the thick of things. They don't like getting into the weeds. Once they get into policing the curriculum of West Point or the Naval Academy, they're going to be very busy. I mean, where does it end? I mean, they have to look at flagrant cases of discrimination, and God knows there's enough of that out there right now. And quite frankly, I don't know. They need to stay out of that area. There's nothing unconstitutional about being wrong in teaching people that white people are racist. That's not unconstitutional. It's simply ethically and morally bankrupt, and it's wrong, and it needs to be repealed. But not every wrong in our society can be reversed by a constitutional amendment.
Was it not against the law though when it comes to like equal rights law?
Well, the Equal Protection Act was inaugurated in 1868 as part of the 3 civil rights amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Black and freed in the 13th, right to vote in the 15th, in 1870, 1865 with slavery. In 1868, the Equal Rights Amendment was basically written to provide for one thing. You can't have one law for white people and another law for black people. That's basically what the 14th Amendment was supposed to be about. It wasn't supposed to be about gay marriage. Let's see how far we've traveled, because these people invent rights. Equal protection now means gay marriage. I mean, this was simply concocted by Boyes and Olson, the 2 lawyers who fought against each other in 2000 in Bush versus Gore. I go over this in The War and Virtue very carefully. They're supposedly on opposite sides. Baloney. The ruling class, they have more in common. I don't care what anybody says. They have more in common than they do that's dissimilar. And both of these, one Republican, one Democrat, got together and they decided that all 30 states, which had voted that we don't want gay marriage, they decided that they were all wrong. And we're going to argue the 14th Amendment, even though it has nothing to do with equal protection for the laws with gay marriage. We're going to argue that case in the Supreme Court. And sadly, they won. It's what is one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has rendered in my lifetime.
Yeah. Now let's move back a little bit to families. We talked about how, the necessity of parents to inculcate good virtue in their children. Have parents really dropped the ball with this?
Many have, yes, many have, and again, this is a class phenomenon. I'm speaking here in general. I'm always exceptions, okay? Whenever you speak in general,
Hmm.
for the most part, the problem is not with the working class and the lower middle class, or even the middle class. It was when you get into the higher realms of the upper middle class, and particularly the upper class. The wealthier the white person is, and the more time he spent in school. Some people say he's well educated. I don't want to take that argument anymore, because a well educated person wouldn't accept the madness that these people have now entertained in their heads, that a man can become a woman, etc. So the people who are the most prone to accepting the kind of mad ideas that we're talking about are indeed the white wealthy class, and they may discipline their own kids one way, but the books that they promote in the publishing world and in education and what they're doing in the corporations and the like, they are trying to infect the minds of everybody else in our society that it's good to think that gender is fluid. Well, first of all, it's not gender, it's sex. Sex is a concept in nature. You're either male or you're female. There's no XYZ person walking around there. You're either XY like the male, there's some XYY, there's always an anomaly, or you're XX. There's no XYZ person walking around the face of the earth. And so, but we have this problem because these people believe that there's no such thing as human nature. If there's no such thing as human nature, then there's likely no such thing as nature's God. And a lot of them don't believe in God. They tend to be secularist. And once you believe that there's no such thing as human nature, no such thing as God, then you can come to the conclusion that life is all basically very fluid. So you can be whatever you want. I have said many times on radio and TV, I've told my staff this, that they know it, they've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it to your audience. A lot of people, they look at me, 6'2", 235. They say, well, you're a big Irishman. I say, no. That's your opinion. I self-identify. I am a Chinese dwarf. How's that? I'm a Chinese dwarf. I say, look, if we're going to play this game of madness, then, I can play the same thing just as well as they can.
Yes, and it becomes very much this worship of the self. When you don't have a God, when you don't
That's
believe
right.
in God.
Yeah, it all comes back. You have to believe in something. So if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in nature, what are you going to believe in? Popcorn? I mean, you have to believe in something. We're here for some reason. And if the Ten Commandments are not a legitimate moral guidepost about what's right and wrong, okay, let's get rid of it. Fine. What do you want to put in its place? Well, I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Thou shalt not. Okay, so no one's going to tell you what to do. Right. So you wouldn't have any problem then if I wanted to enslave you, right? I mean, where do we go with this argument? I mean, if everything comes down to a matter of opinion, then nobody has a right to tell me that I can't own a slave. If you don't want to own a slave, that's your business. But why do you impose your values? Isn't that an example of cultural imperialism, telling me what I can do? Don't own a slave. That's your business. But you have no right to stop me. Now, if we applied that logic to abortion, that's what we've been doing. It's if you were to believe that life begins at conception, it's not a belief. It's not my religion. Yes, my religion teaches that. But that is what science teaches. It's not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has basically been out in front of science on this, okay? In other words, the DNA that makes every person listening to this podcast and watching right now, your DNA is what makes you an individual, unique person. All right? When is it there? It's there at conception. It's not there a week later, a month later, in the third trimester, at birth, and when you're 3 years of age. That's not my opinion. That's not the Vatican. That's simply science. Your DNA properties, which account for everything that's unique about every individual who ever walked the face of the earth, is there at conception, at fertilization, at the beginning of human life. We're dealing with people today who are anti-science. The fact that they are in the Ivy League universities where they should be celebrating science, and they accuse the Catholics and the Catholic Church of being anti-science is one of the most perverse lies in 2023. If you want to find out who the anti-science crowd is, walk into the local college campus and listen to them talk about gender fluidity.
Yeah, and it really is. It's not even. You said, "Thou shalt not tell me what to, what to do," but or what I can't or cannot do. But really, it's "Thou shalt not tell a certain group of people what they can and cannot do." They have this sort of this priestly class of this cult that they have going.
Well, you're right about that, and they're accountable to nobody. I call it intellectual ghetto. They talk about a lot of diversity on the college campuses. The one diversity they should have, they don't. In diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm.
They won't hire conservatives. Conservatives don't even apply because they're not going to get there. If they find out you are a conservative, they'll deny you tenure. I speak from experience. I can tell you personal examples. And I was on the board of directors of the National Association of Scholars for 20 years. We've been trying to reverse this. It's incredible because when you're dealing with people who are not principled, look, I don't care if I disagree with somebody on the left as long as he's principled. But when you're dealing with people who are inveterate liars, who are only interested in power, in politics, in winning, and they don't care about principle, then we have a whole different ball game. And that's what scares me about the moment today. We're dealing with people who they're shameless and they don't care about truth. They don't want to debate you. You're too young to remember this, maybe, but when I started out in TV back in the 1980s, there were all kinds of debate shows on TV, Crossfire, and then later Hannity and Combs and whatnot. I spent my life debating people on the left until they wouldn't debate me anymore. And not just me. They wouldn't debate anybody on the conservative side. They may have all the intellectual ammunition on their side, so they think. They have no common sense whatsoever. We have common sense, and we speak with clarity. These people speak with gobbledygook. Nobody knows what in the world they're saying, which is probably a good thing. But the thing is that they don't want to debate. So when they mention diversity on the campuses, they mention diversity in terms of we have too many Asians, so we have to get more, people from, some other country, some other place in the world, go up to Alaska someplace and find that Eskimo before he runs into his igloo, see if we can't get him to enroll in Princeton. This is the kind of madness that is going on. I mentioned Princeton. There's actually a professor in Princeton. I mentioned him in my book, who teaches the freshman course, and he tells them to hate Princeton University. I'm not making this up, people. Everything I say, attribution, I'm very careful to cite it. That's what they teach. This is suicide, and that's what's going on in this country. There's a segment of the population in high places, not all of them, but too many of them, who don't wish this country well. And I'm trying to alert people to this, so that if you're not informed and find out what's going on, you can't fight back, obviously.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think I would like Princeton very much either. But yeah, no, you make great points. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as a professor? What was your time as a professor like?
Well, I was there from 77 to 87, LaRoche College in Pittsburgh, now a university. Then I went to the Heritage Foundation for a year, 87, 88. Came back to the school in Pittsburgh, 88 to 93, and I came back home to New York to take over as the Catholic League. And I remember when I got the fellowship, I was the first person in the country chosen by the Heritage Foundation in a brand new program, the Bradley Resident Scholar Program, where they would bring professors who were young, middle-aged, and who had distinguished themselves to Washington for 1 year, maybe 6 months in some cases, let them meet the Washington crowd, and then send them back to the university with the connections they've made in Washington. It might work out well for everybody. Well, I was the first person chosen for this honor at a small little college, which was only founded in the 1960s. Nobody had ever heard of it. Mm. And so when I came back to the college, I applied to be a full professor. And the dean, who was on the left, they're always on the left, and the president was on the left. She said, well, you haven't been 5 years in rank. I said, yeah, I've been 5 years in a rank. So you're not counting last year? She said, well, no. I said, wait a minute. I did not stop being a LaRoche College professor. I was awarded a scholarship. I was awarded a fellowship, which distinguished this school. and you're punishing me for it? They said, well, this one sister, she didn't have 5 years in rank either, so we couldn't promote her. I said, yeah, but she had a nervous breakdown, okay? That's a little bit different, all right? Then when my first book came out in 1985, I debated the head of the ACLU, a Princeton guy, actually. He was the head of the ACLU in Pittsburgh, and let's face it this way: I cleaned his clock, as I generally do when I debate. That's one of the things I like to do, especially debating Christopher Hitchens, the late atheist. That's up on the website. You can see that any place. Back in 2000, very famous debate, went on for hours. But no, I saw what they did. The ACLU came in, they took all my books, and they put it on the floor. They put their own books up there. I could go on forever on this. The left doesn't believe in freedom of speech. All right, they don't believe in freedom of speech. And people say, well, the ACLU certainly does. They defended the Nazis back in Skokie in 1978. That was a joke. They knew the Nazis were no threat to America. They wouldn't defend the pro-life people because they are a threat. The ACLU was founded in 1920, and they listed all the elements of the First Amendment, freedom of speech and association, the press. They never mentioned freedom of religion. And they didn't believe in freedom of speech for conservatives, because they actually sued in 1925 the American Mercury, or threatened to sue the American Mercury, a very famous intellectual publication, because somebody wrote an article critical of them. They wanted to shut them down, that they were engaged in libel. Now, I spent my life with these phonies. I don't mean all on the left. I've met some very principled people on the left. Unfortunately, they are in the minority, and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, the pro-life organizations are definitely a threat to what they want to accomplish, and that makes sense. Why would you defend your adversaries in that way? I can see that. What was it like debating Hitchens?
Well, I debated him many times. The big one was at the Union League Club back in the spring of late winter, whatever it was, in 2000. Went on for hours, and then it went on even longer than what even showed up on the website. He was good in the sense that extremely well read. He very knowledgeable, a pretty good debater. I've met better. He's a pretty good debater. He was quick. The one problem I had with him, besides the fact that he was an anti-Catholic bigot, which he bragged about that, but that's not even a debatable question. He hated Mother Teresa and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that he was a sloppy scholar. Now, what I'm saying is he's bright, well-read, pretty good debater, but he didn't do what I do. He never gave attribution. In fact, when I debated him, I said, what's interesting? These are my books, and I held up one. I said, this is an example of scholarship, because I have all the footnotes, hundreds of them, in some cases well over 1,000, 1,800, in fact, in my first book on the ACLU.
Wow.
Now, you want to take on Mother Teresa? That's fine. She's a big target. So you better really have the goods. You better really have the evidence that she's wrong and you're right. Instead, you know what you have, Christopher? You have a 99-page book, so small, it would fit into the sleeve of any sewer in the city of New York. And it's a piece of garbage because you don't have one footnote, one endnote, no bibliography, no sourcing of any sort, just your unsupported opinions because you're lazy and you're a sloppy guy when it comes to scholarship. And I told him that to his face many times. And on TV, I don't like talking behind people's back. Poor Christopher, he's not able to talk about himself now, but we don't know where he is, upstairs or downstairs. That's for the good Lord to decide, not for Bill Donohue.
Yeah, quite a smackdown there, if I do say so myself. And it's interesting because his brother, I believe, is an Anglican, and his nephew is a Catholic, and I believe was an editor or is an editor at the Catholic Herald. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, no. So can you tell us how people can support your work, especially with the Catholic League?
Well, the first thing you can do is to go to our website, catholicleague.org, www.catholicleague.org. You'll find a wealth of information. Right on the front page, you'll see an advertisement for The War and Virtue, the book that we've been talking about, my new one. And then you'll see all the emails that we have, all the news releases. You can sign up. It's free, people. Won't cost you a nickel. You can sign up for free, and you'll get all the news releases that we pump out every week, all the news that you're not going to get anyplace else, the fights that the Catholic League is in, and what we're doing about it to defend the Catholic Church in this society of madness. And if you want to join, it's very inexpensive. $30 for a family, $20 for senior. And unlike other organizations, 10 times a year, you will get practically a monthly, a 16-page journal of like a newsletter of all what we've done over the last month. So you're not going to say, well, wait a minute, why would I waste my money on becoming a member of an organization if you're not doing anything? Most of them don't do anything. Do you know how many Catholic organizations that are out there that may sound good? And guess what their contact is? There's no phone number. Go to info.so-and-so. They don't exist. They're just a cell phone. We have an actual organization where people go to work every day here in New York City. We're not big. We're like the Marines. We're tough. We get a lot out of our people here of all different ages. Of course, I'm the oldest one. But but as long as the God gives me the energy to keep going, I'm going to be here 30 years come July the 1st. And most of my friends are retired. I don't see it happening right now because the country's in trouble. We do have a big following, and we'd like the people listening to this podcast to become members. If you don't want to become members and don't want to make a cash contribution, you can sign up online, then at least get the free emails, which you're going to get about our news releases. That'll keep you right up to date.
Who created the Catholic League? How was it founded?
Father Virgil Bloom. It was my loss that I never met him. 1973, Marquette University Jesuit professor of political science. Same year as Roe v. Wade. And while he was obviously pro-life, his big issue for Father Bloom was school choice. He resented the idea that Catholics have to pay for education they don't want, and as taxpayers, and there's no opportunity for school choice. That was his big issue. He died in 1990. I took over in 93. It was falling apart financially and organizationally. I said to my board, look, I know how to work the media. That's why you hired me. You saw me on Hannity, not on Hannity and Combs. That didn't come out until 96. You saw me on Crossfire on CNN. You saw me with Larry King. You saw me with Bill Donohue and others. You know what I can do. Leave me alone. I'll jumpstart this organization very quickly. Just don't get in my face. And they backed off, and they were very good. And we're very healthy, and we're successful. And by the way, we put down the email address of people who have offended us. You know how do you change the culture? Again, it costs you nothing. Sign up on the email list. It's right on the front page. And when we put down the email, not in every case, but if somebody's offended us, all you have to do is click on it. Takes you right to the page of the person who's offended us. Let's say it's at one of the television stations or newspaper or whatever it might be. And you can let your voice be heard. Now they're going to get bombarded by thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of emails expressing their outrage. That's how you change a culture. I can't tell you how many times we've won on that because people say, I can't get this anymore. Call off your dogs, Donohue. We can't take this. We're getting a bad PR reputation here. So, yeah, you can change the culture. Be a part of it, and just go onto our website at CatholicLeague.org.
Yeah, that's great. It's people are, especially businesses, are afraid of bad PR.
Right.
There's this weird idea that any PR is good PR. That's completely false.
That's absolutely right. You just talked to the people whom we've targeted. We don't need Donahue's troops coming after us. And I mentioned that too because we may be the generals here at the Catholic League. You have to have generals to win an army, but generals don't win an army by themselves any more than troops win an army by themselves. We both need each other. You people listening and the members of the Catholic League already, and the ones on our email list, you're the troops. So we'll work together. We'll do the homework, but you just need you to follow through. Make a click on the email, register your concerns, and you're being a part of something special. You're changing the landscape of America, and you're defending the Catholic Church.
I love the name of it. It's a great historical reference, all the way back to Pius V.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't be here without the people who came before us. and we have to give credit to them as well.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about like gay marriage, but how damaging has gay marriage been on the United States?
It's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that to me because I've debated this subject for many years, and people say to me, and I mentioned this in the book on War and Virtue. People say to me, "Why are you concerned about gay marriage? How does it affect you directly?" And the answer is, it doesn't. But then I say, and they say, "Oh, see, you're making a point." I said, "No, I'm not finished. If a man beats his wife, it has no direct effect on me, none at all. He's in apartment 3A, I'm in apartment 2B. I might have heard about it down in the laundry room. Guy beat his wife, has no effect on me directly." Now let's get real. Is there a blue chip family, the best family structure? And we know unequivocally the answer is yes, but the ruling class is undermining it. It's called the nuclear family, where you have a father and a mother. I didn't say two parents. I said a father and a mother. Now we know a lot of times that just can't be done in many cases. We understand what happens. But you need a father and a mother, an intact family. That's why the Asians and the Jews and the Mormons and the Nigerians are the most successful in our society, as I recount in the War and Virtue, because they come from intact families. And if you have that kind of structure, you're likely to succeed in our society. And we need to encourage it instead of tearing it down, which is what we're doing in our society. So I think we need to fight back.
Yeah, that's great. We totally need to fight back, and the Catholic League seems to be doing some really awesome work. And I really just want to thank you for all the work you've been doing since what was the year? When did you start?
Well, the organization was founded in 73. I took over in 93, so I'll be president for 30 of the 50 years come July the 1st.
You've been working there 6 years longer than I've been alive.
Well, that is really makes me feel old. But it also makes me feel encouraged that we have young guys coming up like you, Connor, and I hope your podcast does extremely well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. So we'll have the website to the Catholic League up. We'll have the Sophia Institute Press link for your book, as well as the Amazon link. I assume the best place to get it is the publisher, is Sophia Institute Press.
Sure, then you're supporting the Catholic community. But Amazon works well too, because the more people buy from Amazon, the more you encourage other people to say, "Look, this book is really selling." They don't give out the numbers with the publisher they do on Amazon, and so I would say either way. But get the book. Barnes and Noble carries it as well. But one way or the other, go on our website. You can buy it there. You can get it from the Catholic League for $20. I mean, we're selling it there. So there's a lot of different ways you can get it. It's not expensive.
Well, thank you for coming on, Bill. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Connor.
Everyone, God bless.
God bless you.